Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from Jon and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite with Jon, Pollock, and Wai Ting, here with you on Wednesday, September the 13th of 2023. How are you, Wai?
I'm doing well, Jon. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
You know
Happy
why?
to hear that. Why is that?
Because for the final 3 minutes of Dynamite, I kind of just sat back and got to exhale. It was not a frantic race to the end of Dynamite. It was as though that's the show. This is all that's coming up in next week on the show. We're just going to go through the matches. They just seem like we're just going to quietly go to the end, and I was fine with this.
It wasn't sort of like a race towards the finish, more
No,
of like a
it was the
casual
complete opposite. It seemed
cool
like
down period.
Yeah, it was like we weren't expecting Roddy to be out of that stretcher or out on the stretcher so quickly, and got like 2 minutes to kill at the end. I was like, fine, totally fine with this. No complaints.
A bit different from previous weeks.
You know, we talk so much about the overrun, not enough about the underrun.
The underrun, yes.
Can we be so grateful as to when we get the occasional underrun? Folks, we've kept you long enough tonight. We're letting everyone out of school early tonight. 2 hour and 35-minute Raw.
Probably not that great for the quarter hours, but
yes.
You know.
There is security at the doors, and they are refusing to end the show before the 3 hour mark. But welcome to the show. We have lots to discuss. It's a new era of professional wrestling and combat sports. MMA and pro wrestling are all going to be one and the same now. It's one universal sport, and all the fans are going to get together. It is combat sports version of the Brady Bunch all together. And what a beautiful marriage this is going to be, with valuations, media rights deals, Saudi Arabia deals. Beautiful. Brings a tear to the eye of the investor out there.
Oh, you know what? Let's celebrate. I'll bring out my affliction. You bring out your tap out. It'll be great.
Could be a big comeback. Maybe Vince McMahon's stylist will put him in some affliction gear. Because that stylist is, man, batting 1,000 this week, aren't they?
I wonder who it is. I wonder if it's somebody he pays for, or if it's just a decision he made himself.
Yes. That render is making it's getting quite the mileage online today of his online photo on the TKO site.
I haven't seen it yet.
Well, you can do some research at some point. But we have plenty to get into. Coming up later this week, we're going to be, what are we doing this week? On Friday night, Wai and I will be live with Rewind to SmackDown, but it's a special edition of Rewind to SmackDown because we are going. Wai has found the photo in question. We are going to be discussing.
This is horrifying.
Vince, smile. Okay.
Like he's got one eyebrow up.
Yeah, this is the look he had when he was just told your dividend payout will be $111 million.
Interesting. All right.
That's What do you think about the green?
Yeah, I don't love it. It looks a little cheap, but
like I feel like this is the most expensive energy drink.
Possibly, yeah. But I mean, how often will we even see this logo? You know, how often?
Well, I'm going to be getting it every day in my email based on the first 2 days of this company, and their mailing list is just immense of what they've been sending out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you what the Titan Sports logo looks like. You know, I imagine this maybe to be as sort of rarely seen.
Well, so Rewind to SmackDown Friday night, 10 Eastern. We're going to be going through SmackDown, and for one night only, we are chatting Impact 1000, as it will be the first of 2 Impact 1000s. I mean, true tribute to TNA of even making their monumental show not make sense. So it will be 2 weeks of Impact 1000. That will be Impact 1000 part 1 and 2.
Sure. Yeah.
So in canon, do they start the count in 2 weeks' time with Impact 1001, or is next week Impact 1001? Which is it?
I'm thinking next week is 1001.
Okay. So we're not going to be reviewing Impact 1001 next week, but this week, Impact 1000. So look out for that Friday night. And then Collision Course Saturday night with Bruce Lord stepping in for John Cena, joined by Kate from Montreal, as always. Sunday, the NWA podcast is coming your way. And if you're a big fan of Bruce Lord, you get him twice this week, because on Friday, we're going to be dropping the new Long and Winding Royal Road with WH and Bruce chatting Kenta Kobashi, Dr. Death, Steve Williams from September of 1994. Where were you in September of 1994?
I probably going to school.
Telling your friends about Dr. Death?
Exactly that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they will be going back some 29 years to September 94. So look out for that on Friday. All of that, postwrestling.com and postwrestlingcafe.com, where you can jump on board and catch Rewind to SmackDown and Collision Course this week. And next week, we'll be diving into the last of McGuinness documentary, the first documentary on Nigel McGuinness, right when he was winding down his in-ring career, which everyone was speculating this summer. Would he be coming out of retirement? But we will go back to The Last of McGuinness, a very good independently produced documentary. So looking forward to chatting about that with Mr. Ting next week on the Cafe. News to get to. Wanted to do an update from Monday because we were talking about the Matt Riddle situation, and it seems like Matt Riddle has not publicly commented on the situation at JFK International Airport, but indirectly seems to have conveyed his side of the story through Anthony DeBlasi at the Don Toni show. So both of us listened to this, and again, this is Riddle's side of things. Was that he was not on Raw, but it was not because of the incident at the airport, but rather dealing with an inner ear infection that he had been dealing with and got worse over the trip to India, as well as about a bronchitis. And that is why he missed Monday, and it's to be determined when he will be back from this illness. On top of that, it sounded like he had been delayed in the airport for multiple hours coming back from India, and had been battling jet lag along with this ear infection, and dealt with a airport security guard who was, the way it was described was making some kind of, he was not outright stating homophobic remarks, but somewhat suggested that based on Matt Riddle having long hair and painted fingernails, and you can draw your conclusions of what might have been uttered to Riddle and such. But that is essentially it, that he may have had like a drink at the airport while he was waiting, but he was searched. There were no drugs on him. And that's essentially it, that it was, and it didn't really get into the post on Instagram, which was later deleted by Matt Riddle. And just for transparency's sake, like, I have reached out to Matt Riddle. I've also reached out to WWE, and neither have opted to respond and share comments. So that's where we stand on that. And if more comes out, we will follow it up on. But it does seem like he was dealing with this illness on Monday, and what the next step will be in this procedure that is going on, that WWE is looking into, and that the Port Authority Police Department was also investigating after the Instagram post was made and then deleted by Matt Riddle, accusing a security guard of sexual assault.
Yeah. Not much to say about it right now, so we await whatever happens.
It was a big day on Tuesday with the closing of the merger between WWE and UFC. Wade, did you get to follow any of the coverage? Did you see any of the media appearances, and just any overall thoughts on just a lot of the attention that is on this, and getting the cavalcade of superstars at the New York Stock Exchange on Tuesday morning?
From my perspective, I mean, I don't know how much as a fan I would have to really comment on at this point. I mean, we haven't really seen actually any sort of direct moves that would affect the content at present. This just seems to be a lot of sort of, groundwork for moves in the future. So I don't really have a lot to comment on myself.
What are some of the maybe smaller integrations you can see? Like, do you expect that we're going to start to see maybe more cross promotion of just commercials for pay-per-views and premium live events, just that kind of back and forth? Like, that could be something very simple that begins where they're promoting each other's product.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, to what extent that that would be. There's been a lot of discussion this week about what exactly the crossover is between professional wrestling and MMA fans, and I think maybe more than ever, you know, certainly from the MMA fan side of things, you might experience a lot more sensitivity these days about, you know, having any sort of professional wrestling integrated into their programming. So I imagine like they would be careful with it on that side. But, you know, a UFC fight being advertised, especially a big one involving like I don't know, a Conor McGregor or something on a WWE show, I can completely see that happening a bit more.
What would happen if green shirt guy ended up in the front row of the next UFC pay-per-view and then Just Bleed shows up on Raw in the crowd?
That would be the real talent exchange, wouldn't it? That would be a real trade. Yeah. They all have their characters, I suppose. But something tells me a front row at a UFC event might be that much more expensive than a typical Raw.
Well, Dana White has always said that the best way to experience the UFC is to come to a show live in person. And when Nick Khan was interviewed by Mark Raimondi at ESPN, it noted in the story that Nick Khan told ESPN he believes that McMahon really started thinking about Endeavor as a partner when McMahon, Khan, McMahon's daughter Stephanie, and chief content officer Paul Levesque attended UFC 276 in July of 2022 in Las Vegas. Khan said McMahon saw similarities between the UFC and WWE and how they grew. I love that this revelation came to Vince McMahon's head in July of 2022. You know what? This is kind of like pro wrestling. And Khan went on to state, it's not really his thing to go to basketball games, football games. It's just not what he does. When he decided, yeah, I want to go, and when he went, that's when I believe he started thinking about it. And it all started to manifest when we engaged in a fulsome process starting this past January. I just would have loved to have seen the wheels turning. Here is Vince McMahon for the timeline. Okay. The Wall Street Journal investigation or reporting starts in mid-June. And then we fast forward several weeks and Money in the Bank is going on in Las Vegas the same night as UFC 276. And this is Vince McMahon all of a sudden appearing in public after several weeks after this scandal is broken. And it is that night as he's sitting back and he's watching Israel Adesanya and Jared Cannonier that Vince is stating, you know what? This is a lot like WWE. We should get this thing. We should all jump in business together. And then he retired 3 weeks later and then had to just spend his whole time going back to UFC 1 and go through the dark ages and then live through Victory in Vegas. And man, how could they go off the air without the last fight ending? And then he did Marathon Tough and he had a lot of time to catch up on MMA and decided at the end of the year, goddamn, I'm going back to work. What's a retirement? This is pro wrestling. I can come out of retirement. What? The board of directors doesn't want me? They think this would be a horrible idea? Little do they know. And he's back. And all of this was hatched on this evening in July of 2022 with Pat McAfee working a neck injury to the right there. Well, look at this. What a group to go watch fights with. Oh, Hunter's got the photo down. He's got the fist pose. He's all ready. It's 2010 for Hunter. He's ready for that affliction shirt.
I'm very curious to know, like, I mean, to what depth of, I guess, knowledge, you know, Vince would have when watching an MMA fight. You know, is he scoring rounds? Is he, you know, the type that just looks for knockouts? You know, like, what would be watching an MMA fight with Vince McMahon be like?
God, there's not enough 10-8s. Could you imagine explaining, like, the scoring system to Vince McMahon? Like, I imagine he's coming into this completely cold. The story was always he watched the Chuck Liddell Quentin Jackson fight, which was 2007. And the conclusion was Chuck Liddell was this big star and he got knocked out. And that was like, we've never heard of any other stories of Vince McMahon plopping down his ESPN Plus subscription to watch a pay-per-view, but would have been very interesting. Pat McAfee should have done a follow-up with Vince doing a fight breakdown afterwards.
Sure.
So anyway, beyond that, in the ESPN piece, it also noted there are no plans for massive changes to the respective products. Mark Raimondi interviewed both Nick Khan and Lawrence Epstein of the UFC and stated that where they could see a potential like synergy is this idea, and Nick Khan spoke about this as well, is like promoting these weekends where you could take SmackDown, a UFC pay-per-view, and a WWE premium live event and pitch them to a country, to a city, bring in that site fee, and that would be pretty lucrative when you're looking at what the UFC is getting in Australia, some of the places that WWE has gone to as well. And this idea, I think I saw some people misinterpreting, thinking that you might get cards where there's a combination of fights and pro wrestling matches. I don't think you will ever see that. And I think that would be an awful idea. But the idea of piggybacking on each other's events, not all that different from that UFC 276 card, where here these two companies were both running Vegas. And this could be done in such a more calculated, strategic way where we are bringing in hopefully different audiences to a major tourist spot like Vegas, and we can piggyback off one another and promote people to both shows. I'm sure that is going to be something that we see.
I suppose, like, in my mind, what exactly is the thought behind piggybacking if they are different audiences?
Well, the idea would be that many more travelers that would be coming, that hopefully you would be looking at creating new fans too. Like, you're going to Vegas for the weekend. I would never travel for a WWE show, but I would for UFC, and I'm going to spend the weekend in Vegas. Maybe I go to this show, and vice versa. If wrestling fans are in town, even if you're looking at a smaller percentage that might want to go on a Saturday night, they've never been to a fight card, and decide to do it that way. But regardless, it's bringing people to the city, and you can go to these governments and state, hey, instead of one night, we could do 2 nights, probably either large arenas or even in some cases stadium events.
Right. I guess in my mind, I just think it would be so incredibly hectic, for, let's say, a big WrestleMania level event type of weekend where hotels are already really tough enough to come by when you're dealing with wrestling fans. When you throw in MMA fans on top of that as well, it just seems like disaster written all over it for me, logistically. But
you don't see these fan bases all coming together and partying and getting along with each other with their political ideologies and such. You don't see them.
You know what? Punching people in the face always brings people together. So maybe never say never. I suppose, like, would a negotiation have to be limited to one particular weekend? Why wouldn't they, organize with a particular government to be able to say, hey, this weekend we'll bring in the WWE, this weekend we'll bring in the UFC?
It's possible. I mean, that Mark Shapiro was asked about the past issues that Ari Emanuel had with the Saudi Arabian government giving back the investment money, and Mark Shapiro was the one who kind of had to, like, take the bullet here and state, we just weren't comfortable taking their money at that time for some things that went down. And the host, Matthew Bellany, cuts in, they murdered a journalist, just so we're not like sugarcoating what happened here. And yes, and he stated, but we never said we would never do business with Saudi Arabia ever again. And now they're in business with them through the deal. And listen, I get it. I think that you can point to an obvious, a calculated and convenient change in philosophy. But I mean, at this level, it really is not a domain for high moral standing and staying to that. Like, this would be a very detrimental blow if you were putting your moral compass ahead of this gigantic deal. So it's like, I get it in that side, but
just as he maybe felt like at the time, doing business with Saudi Arabia with Jamal Khashoggi being such a hot topic would have been bad business for him and his company at the time.
It would have, but it's like he was giving money back. It was like it was not just a case of, hey, we're not taking an event there or something like that. It's like it was a gigantic injection of cash.
A lot of these businesses at the time under public scrutiny were going to face a lot of PR I think disasters in the face of like such a hot controversy at the time. That's not the case anymore.
No, and it's certainly not as heated of a topic as it was in 2018, but I wouldn't say it's nothing either. As we have seen, and you can look at like how far Live Golf got in the United States before the PGA deal, and the resistance at that point as well. But I mean, you're just looking at this, it's a giant influx of just annual revenue that is dwarfing, whatever you're going to be looking at in terms of site fees for an event that these WWE shows are getting, two of them per year. He even threw out the idea like they could take a UFC event there as well, which has never been brought up. That would be whatever WWE is getting. I think a UFC one would be even more revenue for the company on top of it. So beyond that, certainly they're looking at an estimated $50 to $100 million in annual. Here, get this way, jot this all down. Annualized run rate cost synergies.
Okay.
Cuts. Guys, everyone get together. We've got some exciting news about some annualized run rate cost synergies. And this includes migrating WWE to Endeavor's back office infrastructure. The cost savings target presumably will also include layoffs at UFC and WWE, but the companies have not announced details about job cuts at this point. That coming from Variety. So that's in the near future. They also there were multiple bonuses that were handed out to various WWE executives on the completion of the sale. And then today announcing a one-time dividend to all Class A shareholders. And guess who's the largest Class A shareholder?
Mr. McMahon.
That would be Mr. McMahon, who cashed in over $111 million, which I call that's a strong Wednesday when you can pull that off. And there you go. TKO is now a publicly traded company on the stock market under the TKO lettering. So there you have it. Plenty to still come on the whole TKO existence of these two companies. And when someone has a blow up among these, I mean, just look at that picture and it tells you everything right there of what could go wrong.
Which one? This one or this one?
That one. I mean, this is this is all the Marvel characters coming together. Like this is all of Batman's foes together, and they've gone public. So there you have it. Look at how Daniel Cormier made his way into this photo.
He I guess is one of the most public facing fighter they have.
If you were in this photo, would you go tie or no tie?
Depends if I was like a pro wrestler or not, but I think I would go no tie.
Would you ever go the all black Dana White look? Like he just has a look to him.
I don't know. I don't know if I could pull off much of what Dana White has been able to pull off in a public setting.
This is the last one I will bother you with. Is there one person up there that style wise you would most be associated with? Like who would be like, what is your look up there of all these guys? And women.
I honestly don't know if there's any of them. Maybe this dude with half a face that you could see behind Nick Khan's head. I don't even know what he's wearing, but what about
just
you?
Hiding in the background. Yeah, who is that individual in the back?
I don't know.
Okay. So I'd be the dude popping my head out behind Vince. Who's like not even part of this, is just like popping his head in.
Yeah.
for the photo op. All right, we will move on from there and move on to the Royal Rumble for next year. They have announced that they are going to Tropicana Field on Saturday, January 27th, followed by Raw at the Amalie Arena on January 29th. So this will be in the Tampa region, St. Petersburg for the Rumble, and then Tampa for Raw. What was interesting, and we talked about this with Brandon Thurston earlier today, that you can go listen to, is that Orlando was planning to bid for the Royal Rumble. They were going to bid $850,000, and whether there was a better competing offer within the state, I don't know what ultimately landed the event going to St. Petersburg instead. But the idea was to bid for the Rumble and have it at the stadium that hosted WrestleMania 33, the camping World Stadium, whatever it's called. But instead, it's going to be the Tropicana Field, which was one of the homes of the Thunderdome during the pandemic.
All right.
NXT on Tuesday night, a giant number, 850,000 viewers and a 0.26, which would be the 9th highest that NXT has ever done in the demo in its history. And these are their highest numbers since in 3 years, going back to August and September of 2020. They were still only second for the night. There was a big soccer game on Univision that beat it, but man, they killed it. In 18 to 49 was up 46% this week. 18 to 34 up 49%. Men 18 to 34 and 18 to 49 both up 56%. One thing that all was right in the world, Canadian audience was down from last week. So we do have some regular patterns to fall back on. But the big quarter, it was the overrun, with WrestleNomics reporting that the final 8 minutes of the show, not incorporating an underrun, but instead the overrun, topping 1 million viewers, 1,061,000 viewers, and 403,000 that saw Becky Lynch win the NXT Women's title in a very well-received match with Tiffany Stratton that I just thought took Tiffany Stratton to another level. Like, to me, she lost the match, but she won in many other ways, I thought, in this performance and just the positioning of her coming out of this. And I wouldn't even call this the best match on the show, because that opener with Wes Lee and Ilya Dragunov was fantastic. So it was a pretty strong episode of NXT, and not just one that was boosted with star power, but rather it was a very good quality show. You did something meaningful in the main event, and Becky Lynch has proven to be the most effective of any of the main roster stars up to this point.
Yeah, I think this continued sort of like renewal of NXT as an actual third brand within their ecosystem has been really successful. And I would also say, like, beyond maybe these, frequent sort of drop-ins from main talent roster members, their NXT roster day to day, I think, is really coming into their own, whether, if they were originals or if they're like, members of the like stars that were already on the independent wrestling scene and really kind of being pushed to the forefront. So it's a good 2-hour wrestling show right now.
Raw did not have as great an outing on Monday night, going against, I believe this was the most watched Monday Night Football game on cable, I believe. It did a gigantic number. And Raw, conversely, 1,353,000 viewers, which, outside of the Best of show that aired in December, this would be the least watched Raw. So for all intents and purposes, lowest first run episode of Raw in history, and a 0.40 in the 18 to 49 demo. This was against a mammoth game between the Jets and the Bills, which featured pretty big story during the game with the injury to Aaron Rodgers. And this was airing across all of Disney's platforms of ABC, ESPN. The Manning cast was on ESPN2. It was even on ESPN Deportes. So this was just a giant game. I don't know if we'll see another Monday night game do this large of a number, but I'm curious your thought, Wai, that with Raw, that over this last year, they have grown, pretty much. They are down now year over year when we're comparing it to September of last year. But as you have curbed this erosion and picking up fans, I'm curious how much of those people that have maybe jumped onto Raw as it's heated up are people that watching Raw on a Monday night is not their number one priority. And these are people that are going to be more susceptible to strong competition and other interests that they're going to have, such as a big game. And that's why, maybe a Monday Night Football season, it's going to have more of an impact when your company is hotter and you do have more, I'll say, fair weather fans rather than nuts like us that are watching every week.
It's very possible. Yeah. I guess logically you would think that a lot of football fans would be tuning into professional wrestling when football wasn't around. What could they do about that? It's a problem that they faced for 20 something years.
And football, that would be the key, right? Just eliminate the sport. It's been a real thorn in their side, I think, for Vince McMahon. I mean, he's lost millions of dollars trying to promote football over the last couple of decades. Yeah. I mean, I think he just probably hates football by now.
Just get it banned? How would you stop football?
Well, they can't run head to head competitively. I don't think that's going to eliminate them. They could sign. They can't sign them all away. They can't do that. Maybe they could talk about the blood and guts of football. Or maybe bots. Maybe they can try and get people online. Start a campaign of sorts against the NFL.
Stop. Okay, like a hashtag or something.
Whatever happened? Do you remember that story when Tony Khan brought up the story about like these bots and they were doing some kind of investigation or whatever into? Do you remember this controversy?
Vaguely, yeah.
And we never got any conclusion to this. Like these bots, like it was insinuated, like it could have been like who was behind all of this, and Tony Khan tweeted it out one day, and there were lots of questions and follow-ups, and nothing ever came of it.
Maybe somebody can ask him on a future media call. I was never really expecting a conclusion anyway.
He'd be like, "Oh, I forgot. I don't know. Whatever. That was just, one of those things." Okay, a few more things here. We've gone long here, and then we'll get to Dynamite. But last thing is on Bryan Danielson. He did an interview with Justin Barrasso at SI.com and gave a bit more insight into his thought process of what this next year, what his thinking is behind it. And as we suspected coming out of Collision, not the idea that it would be a hard end to his career, but he said, "I don't think I'll ever reach a point where I declare I'm absolutely done. I want the ability to show up when I want to show up. Terry Funk is someone I always admired. He retired a million times, but he loved it so much, he couldn't help but keep doing it. And he did it when he wanted. For me, it might be a couple times a year, or it might be years between matches." And he suspects that it'll be around August of next year that this winds down. And he says that, "I didn't get a chance to do All In this year. I would like that chance next year." And he promoted the match with Zack Sabre Jr. His daughter will be turning 7 in May. So he won't be done by the time she turns 7. But it seems like shortly after that, will at least be greatly reducing his schedule. But I mean, also said like he wants to be able to do many different things. He even threw out the idea like he would love to do a Defy show. And throughout that idea, but it does seem like a year from now, the idea of him as a weekly performer, that is probably not going to be the case for Danielson. And he's one of those few guys that I think you do take seriously when they're talking about this, as opposed to many performers that will always say, "Well, I'm going to be done by the time I'm 40. And then they get there. It's like, well, I'm going to go for a few more years. I think Danielson's probably given this a lot of thought before he stated it publicly in this promo. And, he's got the year to, it sounds like, just go all out. But even he's realizing this. He stated in the interview that all these big matches, I'm getting hurt. And it is a sign like these. And that's, he has a lot of ambitious matches, I'm sure, in his head for this year. And there's that aspect too. Like this guy has gone through quite a lot of injuries.
Yeah, and I think his key right now is to stay healthy so that he could actually have a quote unquote retirement year. It's one thing to just simply be able to make the towns, but he's wrestling too. He's wrestling now, like maybe, I guess maybe more so working the the CM Punk schedule, where like maybe one week he'll be speaking, another week he'll actually have a match. But nonetheless, he's putting himself at a lot of risk, and there are a lot of big matches that I'm sure he's got planned for this next year. So I hope he could stay healthy. But overall, this is like a happy story, so often, and including Bryan Danielson earlier in his career, they're forced into retirement. This is a guy choosing to slowly walk away on his own terms, and let's hope he can get there with exactly the way he intends.
Do you think that Tony Khan would allow him to wrestle a bear on TV before this year is out?
Probably not. Maybe Bear Country or Bear Bronson.
I think if this was another generation and people like, I think that would get a lot of negativity for AEW to do a match with a bear. But in another generation, I think Tony Khan would say, absolutely, you could do it.
I guess it's kind of wrestling tradition, isn't it?
This guy's wanted a match with a bear, and this is the time to do it.
Well, okay.
Would that do a good number on TV?
Bryan Danielson versus the bear? I would hope so. I guess depends if there's a other competition on.
Well, let's get into Dynamite that did not feature any bears on this broadcast. From the Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati, WrestleTix reporting that as of Wednesday evening, just over 2,500 tickets distributed, certainly on the low end for AEW shows this year. And they were starting off with the hometown son himself, Jon Moxley, coming out full-on babyface, and he's in the Bengals colors and defending the International Championship against Big Bill. And Starks is in the corner and tries to trip him from the floor, missing, and Bill overpowers. They mentioned these two, they used to be roommates at a certain point. So we got that little nugget of information. We go to picture-in-picture after Moxley is thrown into the timekeeper's table. And when we come back, The man has been lacerated and he is bleeding. And
those tables are sharp.
They're like, well, he must have hit something when he was thrown over that table. I was like, man, he must have hit something if that's the case. But yeah, he was just covered here as we come back. Big lariat exchange. Bill goes down and then Moxley lands a cutter. Starks then shoves Moxley off of the top, crotching him. And Danielson runs down, attacking Starks. And then a choke slam is hit by Big Bill. He kicks out and then Moxley locks on a triangle. And I really like this sequence where the pro wrestling counter to the triangle is you just lift the guy up and you slam him out. Any MMA fight, like 9 times out of 10, someone tries that and it only gets deeper and it never works. And it's like a disconnect for me, but I figure most of the audience, it's not. But this was one where Bill lifts him and he can't slam him out. And Moxley just gets a deeper grip and Bill just slumps down and he has to submit in 11 minutes and 20
seconds. He turned it into an armbar, actually.
Did he turn it to an armbar? I thought he had like the triangle armbar.
He put his leg on the other side. So yeah.
And he submitted him 11 minutes, 27 seconds.
Yeah. Really good choice of opponent. I thought for Mox to continue this babyface run here in Ohio. Also, of course, a way to, tag onto Bryan and Starks, of course. I didn't enjoy this match as much as the Andretti match on Saturday. Despite Bill, I think, being a more natural heel to, face a smaller size Jon Moxley here, I thought the action was a little bit dull for the most part, especially like when you have Big Bill in control and Mox not really being able to execute his usual style as the underdog. I thought this was a bit of a below standard Jon Moxley title match.
I was into it at points. It wasn't, I didn't think it was a blowaway match. It helped that the audience really did have a babyface to get into. That helped things. But I see what you're saying. It was not at the level of like some blowaway great match. I don't know if this show had that. And that's sort of been a pattern now developing specific more to Dynamite. I don't like Collision usually has at least one big, great match, and Dynamite, whether it's just like where the standard is, but I mean, this was another week where it's like I felt the talking segments were sort of carrying the show in many respects.
I mentioned some weeks you'll get that, some weeks you'll get better talking segments,
Starks and Bill, they continue their attack, and Starks uses his shoe on Danielson. So Claudio comes down. He is not going to put up with a man's shoe. And he lifts up Bill, and Bill gets put onto the apron. And in this whole brawl, they broke Ricky Stark's pearl necklace.
Ooh.
So possible stipulation down the road. And
a pearl necklace match. Oh. Goodness.
They could. Maybe. No, never mind. So after we get this whole like pull apart deal and this angle, they just put the graphic up. Next week, Jon Moxley versus Rey Fenix. I'm like, this feels very disconnected from what I just watched. But
well, I guess
follow up on this.
Phoenix was already in line for a shot after Saturday, so it's an open challenge, and I guess whoever lines up, whoever gets his name signed first, gets the shot.
Renee is with Roderick Strong in the Kingdom, and they get approached by Adam Cole, and Cole thinks this is a horrible idea facing Samoa Joe. He could break your neck. And Strong says, well, now you care about my neck health, and said he's going to break MJF's back and become the new champion. He is a wrestling legend, and they leave Cole to think about this. We had a recap of Takeshita's wins over Kenny Omega at All In and All Out as Shibani brings them out to the ring, and we have the reveal of their next target, aka their painting. So Callis says that Takeshita, better than Akira Maeda, better than Riki Choshu, Seiji Sakaguchi, better than Antonio Inoki. And now Takeshita is the alpha, and not a fake one like Jericho was. An alpha takes everything they can, and then they don't feel anything in terms of remorse, and then they take some more. I didn't know that was the definition of an alpha.
I don't know what the definition of an alpha is.
Well, this is it. Takeshita. He said that they broke Omega's body. Now they're going to break his heart. And they revealed that the next target will be Kota Ibushi. And this is going to kill Kenny Omega as they reveal this painting where Takeshita is raising a sword over Kota Ibushi's head and state that they will take him from Omega. And what they're going to do to Kota Ibushi, they are not just going to beat him. They're going to butcher him, skin him, burn him, and while his blood is spilling, Omega will be at home watching, like the pathetic cuck that you are, and then stabs the screwdriver into Kota's face on the painting.
Wow. A lot was said here. A lot was done here. This is Ibushi's first match, singles match, I should say, within AEW. And I don't know if reviews of his current output has been maybe as strong as I think expectations have been for Kota Ibushi in the past, but in a singles capacity, maybe it'll be very different. I'm always still going to look forward to a Kota Ibushi match, especially in a singles capacity. What did he mean by, Kenny will be watching at home? First of all, they didn't announce when this match would be taking place.
They did not, no.
But is Callis assuming that Kenny would not be present at whatever event this would take place at?
That was the implication, that Kenny Omega would.
How would he know that?
Because he believes he's a cuck, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what his.
The mention of Inoki would suggest Wrestle Dream, right?
You would think so, and it really sounded like they thought that line was going to get some kind of a reaction, but I don't know how many 2,500 people in Cincinnati were going to react to because Inoki was the big name at the end that they built towards, and you would think naturally this is. And did he? I don't really look at Kota Ibushi as this defender of Inoki's honor, but maybe this is more just a line for heat.
Sure, yeah, but
you would naturally look at Seattle. That would make the most sense for this match.
But would that mean Kenny wouldn't be on Wrestle Dream? If that's what he said.
Potentially, yeah. What? Remind me, like, is Kenny just out from this all out beating, like where he got hit with the knee?
It didn't seem like that, the type of beating that would send somebody out for a month.
Because he hasn't been on he wasn't on last week, right?
I don't.
He wasn't. No, he wasn't.
He wasn't. Okay.
It was like that's what we saw. Was like he took the knee strike, which
right.
This Maybe man is going to be at home nursing a knee to the face.
Yeah. The painting is hilarious. I think Callis.
It was the exposed knee. It was the exposed knee.
So the exposed knee. Yeah.
That's it.
I like the nickname the Alpha a lot. It's cool.
Yeah. They also noted the knee now has a name, and I missed the name of the move, but it does have a name now instead of just the knee to the face. I thought this was a great segment. I thought Don Callis was great in the segment, and I mean it's a killer match that you get. I mean Kota Ibushi, I think there is more questions about, but man, this is as great an opponent as you're going to have a killer singles match, and it was, I thought, laid out really well. And I think the most that they have leaned on like the Omega Kota Ibushi like relationship and trying to convey that in this setting.
Yeah.
Marvez spoke with the BCC. Moxley is still covered in this blood, and Danielson issues a challenge to Starks and Big Bill to face him and Claudio next week at Grand Slam. And Moxley mentions how him and Claudio having title matches next week, that's what we call a day off. And Phoenix hears this and he comes over and he just tells him that he's going to beat him next week. There's a pull apart, and we brush everyone aside as Kingston and Claudio are left there staring at each other. And Kingston just laughs, saying one more week before their title versus title match.
And of course, if you remember, they laid Phoenix out ahead of a Stadium Stampede.
That's right. Yes. So affected his ability to travel.
Yes.
Such a bad beating. Renee interviews Hook and congratulates him on winning the FTW title. Obviously, this title win will be the most memorable portion of that match where you beat Jack Perry on the 0 hour, right?
Mm-hmm. That's all I remember. Yeah.
Real title. Cry me a river. And Orange Cassidy comes in. So he was just walking around, and Hook looks all mad, but he shouldn't be mad. He has a title. I used to have a title. And Hook says, "You were a great champion." "Thanks, man. You too." And Cassidy admits that he's still so tired.
Yes.
I'll tell you what's probably making him more sleep deprived is being on the road and showing up at all these shows. Like he said, I'm not going to miss any weeks, but I was like, you're not really doing a whole lot. Like you're physically here. Like that's to be applauded. But I mean, this is maybe catch up on some just 1 week, rest up instead of doing this.
Yeah. Nothing announced, I guess, for him on Rampage at the moment.
Nothing.
So
wasn't announced for any of the shows over the next week.
I guess he just came to do this and to enjoy some catering, to say hi to some friends, I'm sure.
Maybe this is building up to a quarter hour where he sleeps.
I think I would watch that. That would be interesting. So still no clear direction about, what Orange Cassidy is doing afterwards, and maybe you won't get it until after Grand Slam at this point. And what's Hook doing? Grand Slam?
They didn't set up anything for him for Grand Slam, which is surprising.
Where's Action Bronson? What's he doing?
I was really hoping for a year out that it would be Action Bronson and Hook against Swerve and Rick Ross. That's what I wanted. Missed opportunity. I mean, they could always announce something. Toni Storm, Britt Baker, Hikaru Shida, and Nyla Rose. This is the 4-way eliminator match to determine who faces Saraya next week. And Toni Storm comes out. Dude, Toni Storm is going to be a hell of a babyface. They're already behind her. Everyone, like you saw the tits out signs, and man, they popped when the bell rings and she just rolls out to the floor. And then when Nyla's in control, Toni just comes in and does a pose, and this crowd pops. And it was, she's going to be just stealing the attention in these matches. Storm hits a snap German onto Baker and then a hip attack onto Nyla. And she goes for a super kick to Shida, but she hesitates and doesn't do it. So you've kind of got Shida, who is like, how dare you strike me in a 4-way match? And I don't know how you're supposed to feel about this. You've had Britt Baker has definitely a run afoul of Shida, but in this match, and even the announcers were pointing this out, it's this is kind of a ridiculous expectation of your opponent.
Agreed. I don't know if this setting was the best to try to, convey that whatever difference they might have as friends.
So there was a beast bomb onto Toni Storm, but Storm countered and was struck by Shida, and Shida hit the katana to Rose, and then Baker super kicks Shida to stop it, and then we got this really badly timed stomp by Baker onto Shida, and that set up a roll up as Toni rolls up Britt Baker in 625, and Shida is upset with Baker. And that's one story that is coming out of this, and then Toni Storm challenging Saraya, and Nyla Rose was just here.
Yeah, well, she doesn't really have that much story going on. I mean, everything seems to revolve around the 4 that had that match at All In. I thought the match felt maybe a little bit quick with the commercial break in there to be all that effective in maybe being a significant in-ring wrestling match that I would recommend. But it did give us a number 1 contender, advance the story that way. And I think Storm is the hottest character in the division right now. And it makes sense to give her that big title match at Grand Slam. This might even be a scenario where I could see a title win, although she's the type of character that probably benefits more from not winning the championship. And then of course we break off into Shida versus Baker as well.
Yeah, and they brought up the fact that it was Grand Slam last year that Saraya appeared. So here it is 1 year later, and a year ago, Toni Storm was the champion. So that's kind of how they are going into this one. Saraya and Ruby were interviewed, and Saraya goes over her history. Storm has lost everything, including her title, her top spot, and her mind. She's crazy, and she's going to lose the match at Grand Slam, and Saraya is going to leave her with nothing, which I could see being the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get trash talking, but isn't Toni still technically a part of this faction? Aren't these guys all still friends?
No, she's now an incast. She's been casted.
Casted? Got it.
Her new film.
I thought the promo went a little bit hard, for somebody who's still, supposedly has some sympathy, in the past for maybe her friend that's going through whatever Toni Storm is going through. I expected more of a maybe gradual progression towards such a heated hatred between the two.
Cost Ruby the TBS title. That's it. Cut ties.
That's all it takes. Okay. Yeah,
That's
sure.
it. Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara were out to Judas, and they promote this as a first-time match for Grand Slam and how they've been together since the first episode of Dynamite, and they want to remind people of the great memories that they have had over the years. And we go to the cheesiest video done to Don't Forget Me of their highs and lows over the last 4 years. I mean, this was just so...
How do you know the name of the song?
Because of Shazam.
Oh, very nice.
I mean, and the lyrics pretty much consist of "Don't forget me."
Yeah.
I mean, this was ridiculous. Guevara admits he still doesn't know the lyrics to Judas. Jericho laughs. You weren't in key either when you sang. And Jericho said he first spotted Sammy Guevara at the NWA 70th anniversary pay-per-view. Jericho shelled out the cash on Fight TV, ordered that pay-per-view, and was blown away. Called Tony Khan and said they needed to sign him by how he looked and carried himself, and saw him grow from a boy to a man. And now he's won titles. He's gotten married. And then he tried to explain that now he was having a child, but the way he worded this, it was like, you're now having a baby of your own. And then Jericho just cracks and explains that it's your wife that is going to be having the baby, for any confusion that may have been left on the people. Sammy will not be giving birth. Good. New York State Athletic Commission would not allow such a thing to happen.
To have that clarification.
Sammy says, I don't want to talk trash. I was inspired by you. I did code breakers in the backyard. And thanks, Jericho, for changing his life. Without Jericho, there is no AEW. But I didn't come here to be your sidekick. I want to be the man. I want to hold the title and be a top guy just like you. But it can't happen as long as I'm in your shadow. I need to beat you next Wednesday. Jericho says, you weren't brought here to be my sidekick. You were brought here to be a main event star. I've told you to go do it on your own. You have to beat me to get to the next level, but you're going to have to be the best Sammy Guevara you've ever been to have a chance of beating me. And he doesn't think that Sammy is ready to beat him yet. And that sets off Sammy, who says, there's the real Jericho, who doesn't truly respect me like the way I respect you. Well, this version of Sammy will beat you. I'm going to earn your respect. Then we'll shake hands, and then we can go win the tag titles. Jericho pulls him in for his final words. He gives him this intense stare and tells Guevara he's going to give him the match of his life. I'm not going to go easy on you. I'm going to beat the hell out of you and punch you harder than I've ever punched someone before. He's going to have a super vicious punch ready for Sammy Guevara, and he expects the same in return. Guevara agrees, and Jericho takes off. I thought a really good segment to build this up overall.
Yeah, I didn't really quite know what to think of it afterwards, because they were playing the sort of over sentimental card with the video, and then even the actual segment itself felt oddly heartfelt for two people who are, largely heels that are completely full of shit and don't do this type of segment. So it almost, to me, kind of felt like a parody of one of those types of big brother, little brother types of segments. And the end result is that it has you probably feeling suspicious about which one of these two is, acting sort of as not true to their words. But I do expect them to go on to have a tag team title run, because I'm looking for any just continued justification of why they beat Aussie Open last week.
Well, I think that's the part of this. Hopefully they have this great match next week, but you either have Guevara losing and he's got to team with this guy and kind of relegate himself to, I am the sidekick and I'm not at his level yet, and they're going for the tag titles, or he has surpassed his leader, and now Jericho has to be second fiddle to Guevara. Regardless, the tag team, it's met with this strife based on this ending next week, which is kind of the playbook, not the same playbook as Cole and MJF, but it is sort of the same thing where you are waiting to see who is going to turn on who, and whether you're kind of overplaying it when that is your main event angle. But I really did like the segment, just in terms of making this feel like a match that does have some consequences coming out of it, and the curveball that regardless, they are going to team together afterward. MJF, they showed from last week in the trainer's room, nursing his neck injury, and he was happy he doesn't have to travel this week because he's not medically cleared, but he will be cleared in 2 weeks, which I want to know how that works. You're not medically cleared next week because of a neck injury, but you are cleared in 2 weeks.
I mean, maybe just an injury that they think will take 2 weeks to heal.
Well, it's also, we don't want any question marks for those people that buy tickets to see this guy wrestle in 2 weeks. We're making it very clear. Maybe this trainer has an ability to see into the future, much like MJF had to do here, because this was last week and he had to cut a promo about Joe and Strong before they had won their semifinal matches. So he had to preface it by stating that if I think who's going to win, I think it's going to be Roderick Strong and Samoa Joe. So he cut promos on these two and amazing how this worked out, because had either one lost their semifinal match, they couldn't have aired this.
That is a great catch. Yeah. They definitely fumbled by calling this last.
Well, I mean, he did preface it by, he didn't just state like these two. He's like, if they win their next match. So they did put in that caveat.
Oh, okay. So he was more so cutting a promo about who he would like to face.
Yes, he was stating like, yeah, he thinks that Roderick Strong will make it to the final, and the other person he thought he would make it to the final would be Joe. So
I guess that's not that big of a leap. I think that's what everybody was predicting.
He overlooked Darby and Penta.
Mm-hmm. As we all did.
And then at the end of this, so he runs down Roddy the Simp Strong and Samoa Joe, who he states, MJF actually said, it's not about the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. And he's a New York pit bull who has a whole lot of bite. And he promises on his life, this is like Chad Gable swearing to God, that if he wrestles Samoa Joe, he will choke him out. And then goes into the Steiner math promo, which I'm almost over at this point, the Steiner math promo. I actually didn't think it really fit here, to be quite honest. I understand Samoa Joe is the common denominator. This just felt really out of place.
Maybe it was the closest he was going to get to be able to use something like this.
It tells me they're doing one match, because if he was going to do a series of matches with Joe, I think he'd hold off on the math promo for another time.
But a singles match doesn't really call for three-way math.
Not at all. Like, that's why I'm saying he like force fed this math promo.
But here you at least have, I guess, Joe amongst a field of people, right? I mean, whatever. We're way overthinking it.
Well, Brian Cage and Hangman Page, finally, the third installment of this series that goes back to April of 2021 and May of 2021. And for 2.5 years, people have been just asking when. Well, tonight was the night, September 13th, 2023. Cage is draped onto the middle rope. So it is Hangman Page hitting a 619 onto Brian Cage and sets up for the buckshot lariat when Swerve's music begins playing. So they cut to Prince Nana dancing. That is just taken off. This guy is become the star of the Mogul Embassy.
Yeah. He makes this entrance. It's fantastic.
So Cage then takes advantage of the distracted Hangman and deadlift Germans him into the ring. We go through the break, and there's a crucifix bomb counter by Page, and then the Orihara moonsault to the floor. Cage comes back with the German, and Cage is yanked off the middle rope. So he falls down on his back, boots Cage, and then catches the buckshot, and Page comes off into an inside cradle for a 2 count, and then connects with the Deadeye to pin Brian Cage, and goes ahead in the series 2-1 after 12 minutes and 4 seconds. And they are set to have match number 4 in 2027.
I suppose so at some point, right? Yeah, I mean, a trilogy that I guess I don't remember really thinking of as a trilogy so much, but anything to kind of make this match feel more important than it was. And what it really was just a setup, of course, for Page and his promo to Swerve.
Swerve is on the ramp, and Page addresses him about what passion, what drive oozed out of you tonight on the ramp as you watch me kick Cage's ass. You said you want my spot, but you sent Brian Cage out to fight me instead of doing it yourself. I thought you had some balls. So Swerve pulls out a microphone and says, "What up, turd?" And then in what looks to be his ongoing attack on the education system of the U.S., went after Cincinnati's education system, and that got easy heat. Just don't ever insult a city's education system.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what state he wouldn't be, or what city he wouldn't be able to use that on. I mean,
Washington
is is Washington known to have a really good education system?
No, but this is where his promo goes. Like, here is this.
Oh, his own state. You mean
ultra heel, and he does the Nakamura here. He's like, I'm not going to fight you tonight. I will choose when and where I fight you. So I'm going to choose the great state of Washington, where I was born, for Wrestle Dream, October 1st in Swerve's house. And it leads to Brian Cage attacking Hangman from behind. Nana's doing his dance. When the Young Bucks arrive, super kick Cage. They're mocking Nana's dance, and then they take him out as well. So it's Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland. It's in Seattle. And this is something AEW, they continually do. Like, they are not going to have their heels fight the crowd. And instead, you have set up this scenario where Swerve is going to be the babyface to this audience.
Perhaps. We'll see. I mean,
this promo certainly invited that. I mean, he was complimentary. He called it the Great State. It's Swerve's house.
It's possible. I don't know if I've seen that sort of reaction for Swerve the last few times they were in Washington, but I also don't really remember at the moment. I mean, Hangman is also the type of person that you could potentially see cheered over even a hometown person if that hometown person cuts, some sort of promo against Seattle. It depends on the intended effect, but like with AEW, we've seen they don't really mind, sort of what they call, I guess, bizarre world types of reactions from time to time.
Renee interviewed Daniel Garcia, and he doesn't want to be asked about Sammy Guevara. He mentions how he went viral 4 times in 1 month. Was one of them because of Davey?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Callis walks in, and he wants to hear more about Daniel Garcia and talks about the family he's constructing being a utopian meritocracy, and Garcia silences Callis, does his dance, and walks off. Callis doesn't get the hint. He says, "That's money," and chases after Garcia.
So he courted Sammy last week, and then this week, or maybe a week before that, and this week it was Garcia. So could he be looking to bring on every member of the JAS over to his group?
He's going to work on Hager next week.
Give him a new hat.
They recapped Jade Cargill's return on Collision and then announce the big rematch between Chris Statlander and Jade Cargill is happening now and will air on Rampage on Friday night.
Yeah, a little surprising that they were choosing to put this on Rampage and not any of the other shows that they have coming up. Certainly not a pay-per-view.
Not even Collision. Like, you would think this would be. I mean, I'm very curious. Like this, like Collision does have Bryan Danielson wrestling on it this week, but we're going into Saturday and you've got all this competition, and we've got 2 matches announced. One of which is FTR against the Iron Savages, which, with all due respect, you could argue Rampage is like the bigger built show this week based on just the lineup that they've got.
Maybe it's their effort to, put something must-see on Rampage, or at least as must-see as a Rampage can handle. Maybe it also tells you might get some sort of non-finish for another rematch. Who knows? So they could build number 3. They love that number. Yeah.
Darby Allin and Nick Wayne took on Matt Menard and Angelo Parker. We had Jake Hager and Anna Jay in the corner, and Christian Cage and Luchasaurus came out on commentary, and they plugged Bryan Danielson against Zack Sabre Jr., which, if I'm not mistaken, was, I think, the first time on tonight's show that they announced the dream match that is taking place on the pay-per-view.
They like one of Bryan's previous appearances. I feel like you might have heard some mention of it, but yeah.
Well, they promoted it here. Hager yanks Darby and clotheslines him on the floor. They beat on Wayne as they go through the break, and then Darby gets the tag after they come back. His lower back is taped, and Parker is shoved into a Wayne's World, but Menard breaks the fall, and Nick Wayne like rolls to the floor, and he's like so aghast at Matt Menard. He's like, he couldn't believe, like, how dare you break up this pin? And he had this look like he was just insulted by such an egregious act against the rules of professional wrestling. It was an amazing. I was like, dude, you're in the company that this is what they do. They break up falls. Both climb to the top turnbuckle, and Wayne hits a moonsault to the floor while Darby hits the coffin drop on his broken spine and pins Parker in 7 minutes and 39 seconds. And Cage gets up. He says he's sick of these guys and tells Nick Wayne, "I was scrolling through your mom's Instagram. She doesn't post enough bikini pics, but I sent her a private request." And he, I guess, also found on her Instagram way too much talk about the coffin match that him and Swerve lost at Allin. He insults the Bengals and losing to the Cleveland Browns. And Christian notes that he didn't lose the fall in the coffin match, and I didn't have my regular partner. So he issues a challenge for him and Luchasaurus to take on Darby and Sting at Grand Slam next Wednesday.
Cool. Christian, I think, has been doing so well, especially in this feud against Nick Wayne and Darby Allin, and having a match at with Sting in New York, I think, is a perfect setting for them to basically do a rematch with Luchasaurus in Swerve's place.
And then the rundown. Rampage for Friday night has Chris Statlander against Jade Cargill in the rematch for the TBS title. The Acclaimed and Daddy Ass in trios action. Christopher Daniels and Matt Sydal against the Kingdom. And the Lucha Brothers team with the Hardys against Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, the Butcher, and the Blade. And Collision's got Danielson and Claudio against Starks and Big Bill. FTR against the Iron Savages. Main event time, Roderick Strong, Samoa Joe in the finals of the Eliminator Tournament. Strong is stalling on the floor. We go through a break, and Joe comes at him, Manhattan drop, boot, senton, then hits a power slam. Strong comes back, and he's trying for the stronghold, but is kicked off, runs into the Uranagi, and then Joe signals for the muscle buster. Mike Bennett stops him on the apron, and Strong gets up, hits the angle slam and a sick kick that Joe kicks out of. And then Strong, this was just great. He leaps at Joe and his head's taken off with a midair clothesline, and he snaps on the coquina clutch. Strong taps out in 11 minutes and 2 seconds. The road to Max comes to an end for Roderick Strong, and Joe gets onto the microphone calling for MJF, says, "I'm coming to your backyard. I'm going to take everything you have, kid. Everything." And it was 9:54, which is the equivalent of like an hour in AEW time. It was like, what are they going? How many angles are we going to see in the next 6 minutes? And so Joe starts to depart as Strong and the Kingdom are in the ring, and Adam Cole runs down, and Strong looks and sees Adam, and he just goes down to his back, selling his neck. And Tony Schiavone isn't putting up with any of this. He's calling him a fake. It's like, come on. And Adam Cole is looking so concerned. Taz is playing the devil's advocate that maybe he really is hurt. But I thought Tony Schiavone was like the only guy that came across like the credible one, that the audience is thinking the same thing, while Adam Cole just looked like a fool here buying into this.
I agree too. I mean, Cole must have seen whatever. Like we don't know.
The audience saw it, so it's like,
but we don't know what Cole's up to, right?
What, you think this is a plan that he's pretending to think that Cole that Strong's hurt?
Possible.
Well, they do the whole stretcher job, and Cole and the Kingdom are arguing, and they stop Cole from leaving with Roderick. So Cole is there on the ramp, and from behind, Joe returns with a coquina clutch as he replies, "Everything, Max. I'm taking everything from you." And he didn't kill Adam Cole. He did, nor did he burn him or skin him, as another heel has promised. And he puts out Cole, and the crowd starts chanting Joe. They were all behind this guy by the end. I mean, how could you not? This guy's like the coolest character of this whole final segment. Like everyone else, from Roderick, the Kingdom, to Adam Cole, to me, they all came off like the least sympathetic as compared to Joe, who's just this kick-ass character that is the easiest to just get behind.
Totally. Absolutely. I mean, they will cheer MJF plenty, I'm sure, at Arthur Ashe next week. But they've done such a great job, I think, of elevating Samoa Joe into, I think, the hottest version of Joe we've seen in years. Certainly the hottest he's been in AEW thus far. He looked unstoppable in the match. Everything he did looked so incredibly heavy. And notably, they saved Roderick Strong from a muscle buster tonight, which I think they still want to protect as a very legitimate move that could cripple somebody, because they needed, to give Strong the excuse that he's faking the injury afterwards.
And they ended just running through the Grand Slam card. So this is what we have for next week. MJF against Samoa Joe, Saraya against Toni Storm, Jericho and Sammy Guevara, Claudio against Eddie Kingston, Christian and Luchasaurus against Sting and Darby Allin, and Jon Moxley against Rey Fenix. And I guess it remains to be seen if any of these get transferred over to Friday's show. If this is a lot for a 2-hour show.
You mean 4 matches?
6 matches.
Oh, okay, right. Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I have to imagine, like, if they're advertising all of them, you're probably
they could. I mean, they could fit in these 6, but I think that would require at least one of them to not get a crazy amount of time.
Yeah, interesting. It looks like a really good card.
It looks like a great card for next week. We'll see if this lineup moves tickets for Arthur Ashe Stadium. They're at around like 6,300 or so. I don't know how much of a surge you're going to get over this last week, but it is a really enticing card.
And it's now buy one, get one.
Yeah, they are doing that 2-for-1 sale on top of things. So I think they want bodies in there, obviously. But that was Dynamite. I thought it was a show that had more of a building aspect to it. I didn't think this was one of the more blow-away great episodes of Dynamite. I wouldn't say any of the wrestling was anything must-see. But I think everything was designed around building up next week. And I would say overall, I thought, like, I give it a B in terms of the buildup for next week. Like, by the end of it, I think the Grand Slam card felt more important than the beginning of the show.
Agreed. Yeah, I thought they did a good enough job building up Grand Slam to the point where I feel like it's a pretty hot show. I'm actually more optimistic for like the build to Grand Slam than I probably was for the build to All Out or even All In. And let's also say, like, I have higher expectations for those particular builds because they're pay-per-views and one of them happened to be in Wembley. But for a Grand Slam, like a special edition of AEW Dynamite, I think the build has been pretty good for what they've done for Grand Slam.
And even with the story of Roderick Strong, like, the more enticing match is Joe, to the point that I could see a lot of people that maybe just were assuming this would be at the pay-per-view. And the fact it's happening at Grand Slam, like, is that a match that could move several hundred tickets, for instance, that is, a match that if you're in New York, you might not have been assuming that. So it does feel like of the two options, you're getting the bigger match than what Roderick would have been.
Agreed. I think Wrestle Dream is going to be sold on Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr. That to me feels like it's going to be the biggest match on the show, unless they announce something really big for MJF. But Grand Slam, to me, you could headline MJF and versus Joe for that particular show.
Okay, we will open it up. If you want to send in any super chats, you're welcome to do so. And we are going to your feedback at forum.postwrestling.com to chat about tonight's edition of Dynamite. You start us off with.
We have a couple super chats. First one comes to us from Jake from the Windy City, who says, Max, the big bad Burberry daddy. Yes.
Okay.
Really impressive the way he recited the math promo tonight.
Oh, he had it down pat. It was certainly can't knock the execution of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jake. And we got Andy who sends 100 rupees, who says, very excited to see Joe take on MJF. In my opinion, Joe is having his best year in a long time. Also, should we take the all-in turnstile numbers at face value?
Yeah, I wanted to go over this because Brandon Thurston had reported on this, that there was a public records request for AEW All In to the Freedom of Information Office for the Brent Civic Center. And you can read this at WrestleNomics.com. And it read that the actual numbers registered entering Wembley Stadium through the turnstiles was 72,265. This is reflective of what attended or of how many attended on the night and not the total number of tickets sold or no-shows, etc. AEW announced the paid attendance for the event was 81,035, calling it a new worldwide record for pro wrestling. WrestleNomics was told by a source that a typical AEW event has a drop count, also known as a turnstile count, that is about 80 to 90% of the paid attendance, which would make this one, if this number is accurate, the 72,265, 89% of 83,131, which would be the tickets distributed number, which would include comps and such. It also noted it's unclear how suite attendees may weigh into the numbers for either events. So I guess you could still have some questions after this, but that does seem to be the turnstile count. Like, this is coming from the
police,
essentially. Yes,
from the government.
Yeah.
Least. So when we're comparing about records, when we're discussing numbers, what the AEW have announced is that they're 81,035 tickets. That's the paid attendance. And is that still a record?
So the problem is we don't know what the paid number is for WrestleMania 32. We know what the range is. And without knowing that specific number, like, it could be lower, it could be higher than the turnstile count. The turnstile count was 80,709, I think, off the top of my head. And so it could be below that, it could be above that. So that's sort of where it stands.
Okay. So, but as far as, like, if we're taking the Arlington Police's announcement of the turnstile count comparing to AEW All In would be 8,000 short of WrestleMania 32. Strictly looking at the turnstile count.
Turnstile count, yes.
Right. Okay. And again, there's, like, I guess this just kind of adds to maybe, like, the debate and the confusion, doesn't it? Of, like, how many people might be in the suites that aren't necessarily accounted for. You know, ultimately, like, what are we supposed to do with
if there's one thing I have learned over the years, but especially over the last, I would say 30 days, is how these like stadium attendances and even mainly stadium attendances, because you're just talking about larger numbers of just so many caveats of where you can get to these numbers, and even taking into question what the actual capacities of some of these stadiums are. Like, you could probably quiz 20 wrestling fans of what is the capacity of the Tokyo Dome, and you're probably going to get widely different estimates, because there were the days that we would hear the like 64,000 people attending a New Japan show at the Tokyo Dome, and realizing that it's a much lower capacity for wrestling. And like, what is the true capacity, taking in sweep figures? And we're at a time where we're getting more transparency than ever through things like Polestar, like WrestleTix, and just the ability to analyze data, to have government-owned buildings that are going to be able to give you legitimate figures. But it's sort of, especially when it comes to contrasting to the past, like, look how difficult it's been to just nail down WrestleMania 3's attendance and the work that has gone into that. And it's such a quagmire to try and navigate through a lot of this data and get to like some simple ending that you just want to know, well, what is the record? And it just becomes very difficult when we're talking about different categories, like from turnstile counts to paid figures. And I mean, part of you would look at the fact that if like WWE would know what their paid figure is for WrestleMania 32, you would think that in some way there would be an incentive if they had the paid. It's not as though AEW just said that in passing. They made that the calling card of this event. And if WWE has a higher paid number, like, would you want to trumpet that fact?
Sure. What do you also make of Tony Khan on the night of estimating that there might have been 90,000 people in the building?
That seems very high, that they would have had an extra 10,000 people. But again, I don't know if
20, I guess, if you include this if you're basing it off of this turnstile count.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it would be, again, like, I don't know how he's arriving at that number. Like,
Nor how does
we're at the mercy of, what information is available, and hopefully, like Polestar, again, it's an outlet that audits these figures, and hopefully that would give some clarity, but it's not going to be 100% either.
So I guess if somebody in the future were to ask you, or even now were to ask you, what is the highest, like, what is even the metric you would ask somebody, like, in this sort of comparison? What is the most attended wrestling event of all time outside of North Korea?
To me, I honestly do believe that in time, like, I'm starting to value the gate a lot more than I am the bodies in the stadium. Like, let's say this 2-for-1 deal is a big hit, and they go from 6,000 to, let's say, 13,000 people end up showing up at Arthur Ashe Stadium next week. But the gate is a fraction of the last 2 years. I mean, 13,000 is a very, very respectable number. It's not at the level of year 1 or 2 of Arthur Ashe Stadium, but it's still a very good number. But then we look at the gate, like, what does it tell you? Are we just assessing bodies inside of a building, or are we looking at, like, apples to apples,
dollar
people
figures
that are paying for tickets that would reflect the popularity of your product, that they are spending money, there is a demand for tickets, and we're trying to assess how popular this event was and connected with the public?
Right. So wouldn't the amount of money generated by an event be the most important metric of all?
I think it's an important one, but it's not for nothing. Like, an attendance figure is going to be very impressive just by its nature when we're talking about something, especially like the volume. Audiences are going to connect to a number of people attending a show rather than a gate. You can announce a gate. It's not like you're going to hear fans trumpeting the fact that, oh my God, UFC 295 is going to do a higher gate than UFC 205. It's all a game. Like, this is all, we are trying, I think, in good faith to just assess the success of an event. And if you just distill it down to that simple of a question, like, this was just an overwhelming success for the company. We're trying to parse how big of a success was it in relation to historical events of this nature?
Mhm.
And at the very least, All In is going to be on that short list of the most successful events in a stadium setting. And hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity. But certainly, like, this is just like more data that I think gives you more pause on just where this one stands.
More data that I think will be rationally analyzed and calmly discussed on the internet.
I did not. There is a reason I think Brandon Thurston turns his comments off, and it's when he hits the post button on a story like this, and probably just runs for cover. But there you go. You can check out the whole story, the breakdown here at WrestleNomics.com. Any other super chats?
No more super chats. Let's go to forum.postwrestling.com.
Okay, Steve, who is in the weed business. Okay, show tonight. The BCC segment backstage was awesome. Seeing the smoke clear and Claudio and Eddie just staring down each other was powerful. Am I wrong to think that Jericho and Sammy are doing their version of Better Than You, Baby? Seems strange to do the same story at essentially the same time. Do you think AEW has lost direction? People like Swerve and Orange Cassidy are moving into stronger positions, but overall, it hasn't felt like there's a clear direction for most storylines recently. I don't know if it's so much if anything, I think a lot of especially on Dynamite, they have been more focused on where they're going and giving time to build up matches like we got with Jericho and Guevara.
Joe and MJF is a very clear direction. Adam Cole and Roderick Strong, I think, is very clear where.
I think it's more so what your opinion is on the directions, but I see quite a lot of directions of where they're going, from Omega and Takeshita with the involvement of Ibushi, with MJF, with multiple opponents, with like MJF has Samoa Joe, Roderick Strong, and long-term Adam Cole. That's right off the top. And that could be months of programs just with those three, not to mention someone else that probably breaks through and challenges for the title between now and the end of the year. So I think there's lots of great options, but they're going through a lull with their popularity at the moment. Like, that is very evident with the ticket sales. Now that we are post All In, like, there has been a softness with just the level of popularity, and they're serving many different functions at this moment. Like, they're trying to sell tickets. They're trying to build up Collision on Saturday nights. Like, they are trying to do all the number of
pay-per-views.
They're expanding pay-per-views like that. We're not even talking about that. Like, that alone, here's a Sunday night pay-per-view against the NFL, and it's coming just weeks after two pay-per-views where at least a segment of your audience bought both shows. Like, that's another one. It's and the arenas that they're running, like, they're running sizable venues at this point in time when ticket sales have dropped off.
Let's go to Andrew from Cape Breton, who says, it was a great show tonight as per usual, but I couldn't help but be distracted by hearing about the crowd. Next week's Dynamite Grand Slam is going to have a very relatively low number compared to previous years. What do you think AEW needs to do to get back on track? They are in a pretty bad slump when it comes to the crowd, say for All In, which was outside of the US. Feels like Wrestle Dream is going to be a great show filled with incredible matches, though, especially with the ones added tonight.
It's not an easy answer. I think that it's something where it's very hard to catch momentum when you don't have it. And I wouldn't say they have no momentum at this point. Like, I think you have to still keep in perspective the fact that it is still performing very well. As much as we kind of belabor Collision, they were third in their time slot on Saturday night. The only thing that was ahead of them was college football. So that's still a fine standing when you're looking at Saturday night programming on TNT. But I would say it is the case of you're hoping that certain characters can catch on, and you watch the show. Like, there are characters that are popular, and I don't know if people are watching this, they're not seeing enough of a alternative to WWE, when WWE has also, like, they're coming off a really brutal number on Monday. Like, they have like year over year, like, they have seen like a bit of a reduction themselves, but I mean, they're killing it with their live events. Like, they're almost at 13,000 tickets out for Denver for SmackDown on Friday. Like, their TVs, especially, they're doing very, very well. House shows overall very healthy, like, depending on the market. It's just WWE is hotter at the moment. And with these fans, that if there are more people engaged in a WWE product, there is, by their very definition, less of a need for an alternative. And if you're AEW, I think that's it's a very difficult role to have when you are clearly the number 2 company and you have an audience that they get their fill and they're not. And you can look at like, is there a bit of a hangover after all this Punk stuff? Like now it's sort of semi in the rear view mirror, and it's like, has that taken some of the energy out of AEW broadcasts? And now Punk is like, he is not coming back. Like, this is not one of those where, you know, things will settle and he'll come back. Like, this was pretty definitive. And did that affect some of the fan base, some of which latched onto AEW when we saw that big boost 2 years ago and came into this company probably off the back of Punk?
Would you run smaller venues than what they have?
I think that it would be, I think running some, like they were running like the main arena in Cleveland on Collision. Tonight was the main arena in Cincinnati. I think you are like running these larger buildings, and I would at least want to convey like what we had, especially in those like first couple of years of AEW, was that party atmosphere. And maybe it's more conducive. It's not a case where these AEW fans show up and they're not lively. Like most weeks, it's a great crowd. And I think it would make sense. Maybe you scale back a bit when you like, it's great when you can fill a 8,000 or 9,000 seat venue. That's great. But when you're in the 2,000 to 4,000 range, like that's, you know, just on a savings, it would seem to make sense to scale back, even if it's, you know, the idea of one step back to hopefully take 2 forward in the future.
Let's go to another super chat here from Andy, who sends another 100 rupees. Thank you for that, Andy. He says, I think the conclusion to this discussion should be that All In was a tremendous success. We should have never gotten caught in comparing dubiously sourced numbers. Well, what are the dubiously sourced numbers? What has been dubiously sourced?
Yeah, we're talking about WrestleMania 32 and All In, which have like police verified figures.
And the 81,000 is a legit number, but it's tickets sold and not how many people attended. You know, I worry people get confused.
Yeah,
it does not mean
no one is disputing how many tickets were sold. The tickets sold, and you have every right to promote that number. Like, you sold the tickets, and regardless of like how many people were in the building, like that 8135 number is the paid attendance figure. Like, you're not like, no one is looking at these shows and like taking attendance of, okay, all these paid tickets. Like, a paid ticket is a paid ticket.
Okay, last one here. Cody from Maine.
Go to, is it you or me?
I'll go. He says, fun show. While I'm excited for Grand Slam's strong card, it's clear that the show's build and hype has suffered thanks to its placement between multiple pay-per-views. I know Tony loves his annual events, but the schedule has to change next year. It's simply too close together. Too quick. Do you agree with that, John? I don't think the build has suffered. Maybe that's just because I've been coming off of like All Out, which was basically a non-build. I feel like a 2 to 3 week. Like, I think this tournament has been very effective in like drawing my interest, you know, for the Samoa Joe and MJF feud. At the same time, building Roderick strong in Adam Cole's sort of long-term direction as well. I don't have much of a problem with like Grand Slam coming, you know, 3 weeks after All Out. I don't know about you.
I mean, it's worked in the past. Like, this was the timing of it. I think it is a lot when we're talking about a 4-week period of All In, All Out, Grand Slam, and Wrestle Dream all together in those shows. It just it forces you to have to build up 4 significant cards in a very short amount of time. I don't think it's been this catastrophe of trying to build for all of these. Like, All Out certainly suffered with only having a week to build up. And I mean, but you did have you had several programs that were built, and it didn't, to me, feel like it was clear All In was the big show. They weren't trying to confuse everyone by building 2 cards at the same time, but it's ambitious. There's good and bad to it. And with Grand Slam, like, it's a free TV special. So I think your level of expectation is a bit altered. Like, this is about ultimately attracting an audience and secondarily selling tickets.
And he also says, 2 quick side notes. I can't believe Jade and Statlander is being done on less than a week's notice rather than at the upcoming pay-per-view with a bit more build. Feels like a bit of a wasted opportunity. And I presume we get MJF and Cole defending and losing the ROH tag titles at Wrestle Dream to the Kingdom. seems like the next step to continue the Roderick story. Very possible.
It's a possible role for them. It's yeah. And nothing to add to that. With Jaden Chris Statlander, I would think that they probably are going to extend this. I don't see this being the culmination of this program on Rampage. You would think, but yeah, it's a curious move to put it.
Yeah,
on.
it would be really odd for this to just kind of end at Rampage. So I'm sure the spoilers are already out there, and maybe we can look at it after the show.
Okay, well, Friday night we're back 10 Eastern. We're going to go through SmackDown, and we're going to go through Impact 1000. When was the last time we sat down and watched Impact?
I've probably seen matches here and there, but not a full edition in quite some time.
So join us, postwrestlingcafe.com Friday night, and then Saturday night you get Bruce Lord and Kate from Montreal to go through Collision, and the FTR Iron Savages, which maybe that's why they announced 2 matches. Maybe they're going 60. Or tease it. They'll go 58 again.
That would be quite something.
Career making match for the Iron Savages could happen. So there you'll get to see you'll get to see Dax and Cash wrestle a bear on Saturday night.
Yes, can't wait.
All right, that is it for us. You can also check out today's edition of Pollock and Thurston. Really great show today talking about the TKO merger. We had Patrick Auger from the Fight Business podcast on with us, and a lot of Brandon and I going through all aspects of the TKO merger, hearing from Nick Khan and from Mark Shapiro from some of their various media appearances, as well as all the latest news. So go check that out each Wednesday, 3 Eastern on the WrestleNomics and Post Wrestling feeds. And that is going to wrap things up. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. And that concludes Rewind to Dynamite.